So there we go. I did it. Yay, thanks, Carol. You never know when it's going to click in. So thank you so much for joining us for our fourth session, fourth and final, if you can believe it, for the Anxious Generation Learning Series. And we're really excited about our Voice from the Field today and to share some of our learnings from the text with you and to share some great resources. So I put in the chat the dashboard for you so you can see that. Lots and lots of resources today. So you can put that to the side and just listen, or you can follow along, whatever works best for you. So as a reminder, we are your team of three. I'm Liz, joined by Anne and Liv from MDE, who are here supporting you in learning about how we can support our staff, our students. And today we're excited to focus on parents and how we are supporting the larger community and all that goes on outside of our school buildings. So as a reminder, we have our intentions that we really encourage you to consider as we go about this hour, which is to primarily take care of yourself and engage as much as is possible for you today. And when you can, take some risks and experience that discomfort and that cognitive dissonance that you may experience. So I will turn it over to Anne for our grounding.
Speaking of cognitive dissonance, I've been much more aware in the last few days of my own use of my phone for good and as a distraction. And I'm just in this moment noticing a couple of you are joining on your phone. So, yay, it makes it possible to join remotely. I'm also remembering a professional learning I was doing in a school on Friday where I could visibly tell people were irritated with each other because they were looking at their phones when before we had gotten started. So I'm acknowledging it is a
Well,
tough, messy, in between time of year. Even the season itself is, it reminds us of that, right? I mean, you get a sunny, warm day. I took my grandchildren to a park on Friday, and then, moving the garbage cans up to the end of the road with mud and slush and ice under my feet Saturday and Sunday and Monday. So, welcome. Thanks for making this a priority and joining us. Well, it is spring and it is my favorite time of year, as messy and in between as it is. And at the end of this book, The Anxious Generation, Haidt brings to mind this gardening analogy. And of course, I grabbed it. I thought, oh, that is so good. So I want you to think about your role, and you can pick. You can pick your parenting, you can pick your educator, educational leader person, you as the person, or there was a third one I had here. Where is it? Oh, an educator or a leader, or both. You pick the role you want to think about yourself in and tell us whether you think you are taking a carpenter approach or a gardener's approach to your practice, whatever that is. Again, center yourself in your parenting or your educator or your leader roles. Liz is going to animate the left side of the slide first. I'll give you a minute to read those bullets. Carpenters, they're clear about ideas of what they want to achieve. I watched my son-in-law draft some things the other day and I thought, man, there's a lot of math in that. That is really true. It takes a lot of detail. Remeasure, remeasure. They also collect carefully curated materials. The tools, he joked about his truck being like Mary Poppins' purse. It carries all the tools he needs for jobs. They assemble them in just the right order. We just had our bathroom remodeled, and I noticed the routines that the plumber and the carpenter and the tile layer have. And they produce a product that's judged on explicit standards. You can tell if it's crooked. You can tell if the caulk isn't sealing right or if there's a need. As opposed to gardeners. Gardeners focus on establishing a healthy environment, the conditions. As a gardener, I love the soil nutrients, the sunshine, care for the surroundings, pulling out those weeds, which, by the way, is the thing we often overlook because we don't want to do that part. But pulling out the weeds matches what we're talking about in this series as well. we're pulling out some of the weeds that are unnecessary. And sometimes it's a unique kind of support that we provide, and it's unpredictable. We don't know what the weather's going to do. We don't know what that means, but we keep trying. We keep repeating the conditions that we know will help the plant grow, and the plant might surprise us. So this is one option you have to talk about in your breakout space. I would offer that I think our institution, in the history of education, we have come to rely heavily on the Carpenter approach, heavily. So much so that we've lost some of the delight in the gardening approach. Just offering that as a way to think about it. On the next slide, we're also asking you to consider, as part of your breakout room conversation, what you opted to do between sessions, between March 17th and today, or between any of the other sessions. I took your responses in the feedback form and actually used ChatGPT to say, find me the themes, find out what people are most focusing their actions on. And these are the 4 buckets that ChatGPT identified. The first one is you're trying to promote digital well-being, whether it's through establishing a student club, engaging parents in discussions, or changing the way you communicate in your newsletters or in staff meetings. Second bucket is about integrating play into education. Liz, if you could click again. The play in education, and particularly I noticed this among middle school and high school leaders, reassessing kind of what is recess or play at the secondary level. What might that look like in my staff community building, in my staff meetings? And the third bucket of your responses fell into your own communication and collaboration. You are now thinking about how you could involve students more intentionally in policy change discussions, how you could share resources with staff, how you could implement an advisory committee. And the last bucket is about your own learning. You're delving into the resources, you're researching the organization that we shared a couple of times in session 2 and 3, Live More, Screen Less, and you're reflecting on your own practice, your own use of your phone, your own use of social media, and exploring some innovative approaches to both education and well-being. So for your breakout space, we are offering you those 2 options. I'm going to copy them.
I added them in the chat, and so they're.
I'm going to put the Carpenter Gardener thing in the chat too,
Gotcha.
just so they can see the characteristics in case you want to talk about that one. And how many minutes are we thinking?
I have opened them for 8 minutes.
There you go. Enjoy the conversation.
You're gonna, Maureen, you're welcome to stay in. Yeah, you can hang out. That's up to you. And Julie, yeah, Julie, I would say go in the breakout if you're able and just let them know that you're just listening. If you're comfortable with that.
Hey Liz, I just jumped in. Is there any chance I could get thrown into a breakout?
Yes, thank you. I apologize. I think that's
No worries.
the second time I've done that. Thank you for your patience. I think we're all back in.
Welcome back. Could we hear 2 insights gained from the conversation, whether you focused on what actions you're taking in your learning community between these sessions or the Carpenter Gardener approach? 2 insights.
This is we just, oh, sorry. Oh, wait. Okay, thanks, Dan.
Yeah.
This is Shannon, and I'm a director of special ed in Intermediate District 288. In our group, we talked a lot about the carpenter versus
Yeah, you
gardener.
keep
And we
There's
discovered
some
that a
something
lot
happened
of
to her
positive
mom?
things that were over here, but that's a positive. Like,
It's fine, nothing to hide.
Sorry about that. We'll catch those. Go ahead, Shannon.
I was just saying, we found that a lot of us were in that gardener space. A lot of us are going through some changes within our districts. But then, we talked about as a leader, you really kind of have to have carpenter and gardener, like all those skills, like balancing both. So we spent a lot of time talking about that. And then we were just getting ready to go into what have we done so far. And I think it was Teresa. I'm hoping I'm remembering her name. Um, and she talked about how they've gotten where they have parents that are coming together with, I believe it was staff and students to play kickball, like a time because they're not doing it. They're in St. Paul and it's not happening within their communities. I don't know if Teresa wants to talk a little bit more, but yeah, so we were just starting to get into that conversation as well.
Yeah,
How
we-
wonderful.
We
Go,
shared at
Teresa.
our FSO meeting. I shared that I was doing this work and reading the book, and a number of my parents had read it. And quite a few sixth grade parents, because I'm at a middle school 6-8, were frustrated with the lack of children in their neighborhood for their kids to play with. And I said, our playground is always open. Thursday nights, we don't have a lot of people pulling permits. Let's just let the sixth grade families know, show up for kickball at 5, bring a picnic lunch. I said, and help the kids get started playing, but then step back and let them figure it out, and you get to know the parents. So we're going to see if that takes off. We're on spring break right now, so the plan was to do it mid-April to get it started.
Teresa, how exciting. And I'm bringing back a memory of meeting you from an 8th grade student years ago. Oh, it's so good to see you again. What a great idea and how fun for everybody involved. One more insight from the breakout conversation.
In our group, one of the people, and of course I forgot your name already, brought up that she's going to be doing Screenagers, viewing the movie Screenagers, and then doing breakout sessions with her. So we were kind of interested in that to learn more about that, the Screenagers project. But just how all of us have been involved in different ways, whether it's getting a book study started or just people talking about this, and how even since I heard about the book, how many people you'll be talking to someone else just anywhere randomly, and they are like, "Oh, have you heard of the Anxious Generation?" You're like, "Yeah." People completely not connected to education, so that's been kind of fun.
Agreed, Rose.
And
I
as
so
it's
agree.
been nice outside in Minnesota, I've also, as you were saying, playing outside, I've been really aware when I go home that I'll always be like, "Oh my God, there's kids outside playing basketball. There's kids." and then I'll go right back to the book again, like, "Oh, look at those kids aren't on screen time." So it's been kind of just made me aware of what our kids doing.
Totally appreciate that, Rose. Thank you so much. And Sandy, you unmuted. Can you share what you were going to share?
Actually, I was in Rose's group. I was the person that was doing the Screenager. So I was just going to say how we're all finding that there seems to be really fertile ground right now to have these discussions. People are very interested. They want to learn more. They want to do better. So it's just a great opportunity, it seems like right now.
I would agree. In fact, I think Jonathan Haidt, whether we agree or disagree with him, he certainly did us a favor in getting this book out because more and more people are aware and trying to have conversations about it. We hosted an extended family card party this past weekend and people were all over it. And like you said, out of education and in education. So it's really a way to engage the community. Thank you all so much for sharing those insights. On the next slide, this quote spoke to me when I was reading the book. And at the time that I was reading it, I had students on my mind. There is more to us than we know. If we can be made to see it, perhaps the rest of our lives, we will be unwilling to settle for less. There exists within everyone a grand passion, an outlandish thirst for adventure, and a desire to live boldly and vividly through the journey of life. I also wanted to elevate it at this session because I'm thinking back to Olivia, the student we had during session 3, and she made a comment at one point, and we just kind of brushed over it that day, but I thought that was an important point. She said, by the way, thank you for including the screenagers. I was going to suggest we put that on our dashboard. Thanks, Liz. She said something about, she was kind of talking about the digital well-being club that she was in, and she sort of said under her breath, you know, it's kind of non-hierarchical. We kind of do this thing. And I went, wait, what? Did she just say non-hierarchical? I thought that was such an important factor for a student to acknowledge, that it was non-hierarchical. And what it reminded me of, and I think the reason I wanted it at the beginning of this session, is because whatever we do in response to the anxious generation, let's be sure we're doing it with kids, with parents, with the community. And I just wanted to elevate that from Olivia's message that time, because it was so like off the tongue, and it just gave me pause for quite a bit of that day. I'm going to tag Liv.
Sure. Thanks, Anne. Okay, so these are our learning targets for today. As you know, we're focusing on that family-school partnership. And I think in this next few slides, and actually in this whole series, which I've been so thankful to be a part of, I've brought both my early childhood educator lens, but also big time my parent lens. So I know we have a parent, I think, talking today later as well, so I'll try not to steal her thunder, but I'm a parent of a 14-year-old daughter and a 10-year-old son. So like this, I'm in the thick of it, right? So it's just been really also exciting to see so many educators taking this on as well, because it's an interesting world we're in. So the next slide, I wanted to highlight this quote because it really spoke to me. It's been something I've been thinking about again as a parent, that we know parenting is a challenge, right? Many of us who have been parents are parents. It's not easy, it's rewarding, it's hard, it's all of those things. But it's become far more challenging in our era of rapid social and technological change. And what that's meant for me is that I really, as a parent, feel like I have very few, if I could even say almost no, role models and mentors on how to parent children today with screens. Because even my dear friends who have kids that are maybe seniors or early in college, their experience raising a 14-year-old was very different than mine is today, because screens are evolving so quickly and rapidly, and the challenges that we're facing are new practically every month. So it can be kind of lonely and certainly scary to be, looking to my parenting peers or my parents and feeling like lost, like nobody is telling us what to do. And I think that's also true, I'm sure, for teachers in classrooms, school leaders, as well, as we're looking for someone who's been through it all and can give us guidance. And that's really lacking in this era of such rapid technological change. But if you click, Liz, not all is lost. We can all work together, as we'll talk about, and build that partnership and all become better gardeners. I really like just keeping that kind of eye on the prize of, well, I don't know what's coming next, but how can I keep the environment that my children or my students are in safe and healthy and fertile for them to grow and develop? So next slide. So as we were as Liz or Anne was mentioning too, this is a partnership, right? So this is all going to take teamwork. A lot of responsibility is there on families. A lot is on teachers in classrooms, communities, and of course, how can we support at the state? So the visual below is what my early ed division, we call our successful learner equation. We're applying this frequently to our work in the early childhood field, but I think it goes across grades, is that really, it's the job of adults and systems to be ready to support all children. They're there to learn and to be engaged and build and develop and grow. So this work addressing screen use is a team effort, which I'm sure is not lost on all of you. And I think what's important as well, as Anne mentioned, is bringing the student voice into that effort, because we're all around creating that space for that lovely plant to grow, but we want to know what that plant's experience is. Like, what do they need? They're the ones really living it. And I'm an observer and I'm living my own experience for sure, but trying to figure out how to help and navigate this space they're in. So really important to bring that voice in. So we wanted to talk just a little bit about this idea of a real versus virtual world. And this is brought up a lot in the book. There's obviously, we're not going to get heavily into some of the key characteristics of the two different worlds, but we know the real world is really a concrete experience, lots of one-on-one intimate interactions with other people, face to face. Learning how to navigate a consistent social surrounding, where the virtual world is going to be certainly more opportunity to connect socially, but frequently much more surface level. Pick and choose what you're sharing with others. It's not a holistic experience as much. But yet what we see, while those real world experiences and those interactions are so valuable, what's grown over the past decade or many decades is that the real world is frequently more overprotected, this idea of safetyism. Whereas the virtual world tends to be quite unprotected. I mean, partially as a parent, because it can't even figure out how to protect it, right? It's just so vast. The technology is so advanced and confusing. We all know that teenagers can figure out how to use things way faster than any of us probably can. And so we're kind of struggling with overprotecting and trying to kind of compensate with this safetiness in the real world, which is where we as humans learn to be and grow, and then having this overprotected virtual world. So we can keep going. So a few things about the caution with safetyism. I mean, obviously we want to keep our children, our students safe, but when we are so extreme, we're preventing students from having experiences with others where they maybe take risks, they learn to care for themselves. Obviously, right, we know they learn to manage the risks, their conflicts, they learn to get over frustration, self-management, self-governing, overcoming their anxiety. So really, as we're gardening, we don't want to make it such a perfect place where they never experience any challenge or frustration, because then they don't build these really important skills. So we know that we want to obviously help them in a safe space, but instead of imposing these strict rules that eliminate any exposure to risk, eliminate those experiences, what we want to do as adults, as parents, and as educators together is helping students, children hone their decision-making and thinking skills, help them have those experiences. How does a baby learn to walk without falling down 400 times, right? And as children grow older, it's different things they're learning, but they need to have those mistakes, those accidents without like severely hurting themselves, of course, but those are really critical. Yet we see this overprotection happening. And I almost wonder, in some ways, even for myself, is it a response to knowing that I have such a difficult time protecting the virtual world? So how can I make sure everything's fine in the real world? But we need to be careful not to take that to an extreme. So this slide is kind of about doing that gardening in the real world, providing opportunities for exploration, risk-taking, and so on. And we're bringing it back to play, which is a passion of mine, as I'm sure you've caught on. But I also really want to encourage you to think about that word play. Again, remember, I think our last session, we talked about how play can look different across ages, across grades. It's not always dress up, right? It can be hanging out and lounging around and chatting with friends. It can be recess. It can be a project-based experience. So please just kind of replace that however you want when we're talking about play in this slide. But this also speaks to that idea about the kickball part that was just shared as well. So we want to create these opportunities for students. But we also need to keep in mind, many of our young people have been living in this overprotected world, particularly with COVID, the pandemic having happened through their early life, with their use of screens having been underprotected, that we may need to help a little bit in supporting that play, in supporting recess or hangout time, right? So what are the things we can do without taking over, which is really key. And so, yes, we just heard that with kickball, right? We want to plan. So how do we create that environment that builds on strengths, follows the interests of the school community, in that example of the students, of the children, keeping in mind what they are looking forward to. I'm thinking my daughter's really wanted to be babysitting, so I've been planning for her first babysitting experience. So I'm still kind of curating, cultivating that, but I'm not doing it for her or doing it for them. Or in the kickball thing, like the teachers aren't taking over and telling everyone how to do it. We're just helping create that space. Then supporting it. So talking about the play, interacting, being with, but like non-hierarchical, like we heard Olivia say. So making sure that we don't just say it totally hands off. How can we be with our students in this way, or be with our children? Help families know that that's an important part of the experience. Talking about it, validating those efforts, and then reviewing, check in, observe, and then co-plan for future opportunities. What should we do next week? How could this look? What would be fun to do off of that? So just helping, and I think it came up in our last meeting too, of like, well, you know, you might provide recess, but the kids don't seem to be doing anything. Well, keep in mind, they might need a little like gentle push, some careful guidance. And it's definitely a balance to not take over. I think as adults and teachers, sometimes we want to like lead and direct, but how do we kind of get them out there and help them to build those skills, and then step back so they have those really important concrete experiences. All right, next slide. So I really wanted to keep this quote. This kind of goes back to the definitions of real world versus virtual world. And again, those real world experiences not only build those skills, but you can't escape them. I mean, obviously, in some cases, you can step away from a group, you can take a different class, but like you're in it. Where the idea of the virtual world is you can just click out of a group chat, you can just exit, enter these social communities without having any any like commitment to it, right? Like any real involvement. And you can get in an argument and then you can disappear. You might never need to follow up or learn those skills about communicating with others in an engaging way. And so I'll just read this quote. The key factor of the real world, the difference from the real and virtual, is the commitment required to make relationships. When people are raised in a community that they cannot easily escape, they do what our ancestors have done for millions of years. They learn to manage relationships, how to manage themselves and their emotions in order to keep precious relationships going. So it's really important that we keep our students in the real world, create that space, and don't overprotect it so they don't have these experiences to learn to manage themselves, learn to manage with others, and learn to maintain healthy relationships, because they won't get that in the virtual world. That just is not going to happen. These next two slides are just some like supports for parents. And I was in a breakout room where someone mentioned they had just, offered some guidance and support, or like a parent ed hour on screen use, and that it was way more attended than they expected. And I will just say again, as a parent, like, I am looking for that. So if schools can offer, and I'm sure many of you do, many of you may not yet. And I just think that would be so important, having an opportunity for a support group, really is what I'm going to call it at this point, a parent support group guidance for how to address screens at home, because we only know what we know when we're all scrambling as parents. And knowing what the school is doing really helps to figure out how we can balance and work together. So anyway, these are just some tips I found when looking to prepare for this. The how, the where, the when, helping families make those decisions and know that they can and should make those decisions. This is how we can start practicing a little more safetyism in the virtual world. And then the next slide, also a big long list, but I really liked the bottom, which we've talked about every session, is the importance of us serving as positive role models on healthy media use. Because we know that, again, I work a lot with young children or in that realm, but I know when I tell my kids to get off their phones, guess what they tell me? They throw it right back in my face that I should be getting off my phone, or I'm on my screen all day. And so remembering how important my role modeling is for them as well. So I hope that kind of flowed and made some logical sense for all of you. I'm just very excited to be here and know that there's so much interest and commitment to taking on this challenge, and hopefully we all do it together. So I will pass it off to, I think, our guest speaker.
Yeah, I'd love to introduce Jen to share more about their journey at their middle school. So I'll introduce Jen Benz and let her introduce herself and tell her story. Let me know, Jen, when you'd like me to advance the slides.
Sounds good. Thank you. Well, thanks for having me, everybody. Just real quick, again, my name is Jen Benz, and I am currently the behavioral specialist at Valley Middle School of STEM in Apple Valley. Prior to that, I was 3 years as a school counselor. So I started with the 6th grade group, went through 7th and 8th, and then took on this role this year. Prior to that, I was a counselor at an elementary school in Farmington at Farmington Elementary for 14 years, then a rec therapist for kids ages 5 to 13 in Colorado, kids that were severely abused and neglected, both and lived there residential and day treatment. And then my first job out of college was at a LAC treatment center in Colorado as a counselor for boys ages 12 to 18. And then also in between there, got to stay home for quite a few years. So I'm dating myself with that. But I'm happy to be here and kind of excited to share our journey, or my journey with this, both as a professional and as a parent. So Liz, if you want to go to the next slide, that'd be great. In our district policy is phones are off and away. And that can look different in other buildings. For us at Valley Middle School, it's off and away. It needs to be in your backpack. We don't have phone cubbies like in the classroom. The expectation we don't see that phone for the full day. And if we see it, they get a reminder. But depending on the student, if it's the same student, they're not going to get the reminder and we take the phone. And then they can get their phone back at the end of the day. And then for those students that habitually are on their phone, their parents eventually have to pick it up. There are many times where I'll just walk in a bathroom and be like, hand them over. And as I was sharing with Liz, my issue is I don't always know the names. We have 1,100 students. So I'm like, well, hopefully they'll go to the front office and get their phone because I don't know who they are. And I just let the front office know if somebody comes to pick it up, they can have their phone back at the end of the day, or they can't. At Valley Middle School, one of the things that we have implemented is that students, because we are a 1-to-1 district, we have every student has an iPad. And if they don't have their iPad, then they're able to check out a Chromebook if they need to. But they are invited to use their technology. So theoretically, they're not supposed to be on their iPad like before the class starts or playing games or anything until the teacher invites them to do that. So we shouldn't see them in the hallway, etc. We do, but again, that's something that we're continuing to try to combat. So they're just not constantly on their phones or constantly on their technology, because we just see kids just glued to their, I'm sure as many of you guys do, playing video games or what they can do any second that they have available. So next slide would be great. Some of the other things we do specifically at Valley Middle School is with our 6th graders, it's a tech-free lunch. So obviously their phones are off and away, but they are not, we don't let them bring out their iPads or bring any sort of handheld video game. Our lunches are 30 minutes long. So we have half of our students go to lunch, half go to advisory. So we just want them talking, interacting with each other, with their peers. They'll bring out Uno cards. We have a lot of kids that read books. The 6th grade is the only grade that does this right now. So we kind of, with each administrator, they kind of have the autonomy to do what they want with their grade. But for not having that distraction, our lunches are going pretty well. We have about, 150 to 200 kids, depends on the day, and any given lunch. We did start this year, our 8th graders get to go outside for at least the last 15 minutes of their lunch. They eat very, very late, so they only have one class period left in the day, but the teachers report the improvement of their ability to come in and focus has drastically improved when they get those days. And we really don't have an issue with them being on their phones when they're out there. And I think that's part of our off and away policy. We don't want to see it because they know they're going to get it taken away. Now, there are definitely roadblocks with this. If I were an 8th grade student and I could be outside for an hour, I would probably do that. We have a lot of kids that will skip their advisory or not go where they're supposed to do. So, and then just trying to manage the manpower of of watching all that, that's kind of a roadblock too, but we do our best to get them out as much as we can. In the past, when I was the 7th grade counselor, I did a 0 social media challenge with my 7th graders. So they were tasked with giving up social media or gaming for a week, and their parents had to sign a permission slip. Obviously, we couldn't say they had to give up their phones because some of them don't have landlines, but parents were theoretically supposed to be on board with kind of tracking their kids and making sure they weren't on them. They turned their phone in every day and during that week and track kind of their emotions was our goal with that. And then at the end of the year, we did a extra field trip to the park, and again, no phones. But what was really neat about the field trip was they were there all day and they just played. And we had students interacting with each other that normally aren't in the same friend groups. They played volleyball, they got in a water fight, we played capture the flag. They were exhausted. It was hot, and it was just really neat to sit back and watch them have this experience as being a kid. And that's kind of where my passion for this kind of evolved. I'll say I was meeting with 3 girls, and they were just kind of having a hard time. And as we talked, finally, I said, you know what, I think it's your cell phones. I think it's your phones that are causing you to not feel good. And the one girl goes, you know, you're right. Because if you think about our friends who don't have phones or social media, they're the happiest kids in our grade. And I said, well, who are those kids? And they gave me a list, and I'm like, oh, you're right. Like, they are good students. They don't ever get in drama. They're not, you know, they're not emotional. They seem to be emotionally stable, or they're not needing the help of the school. But it was kind of like an aha moment for me. And that's where that 0 social media challenge came out. And then the counselor the next year for 7th grade did the same thing. So we're trying to keep that as a pattern going on. All right, next slide would be great. So one of the things, and talking with Liz about this was, you know, what can we do as schools to help set the example or help support our families? And I think we probably all do this, but just came up with the list. So elementary, you know, and as you guys have been talking, getting them outside, getting them playing, free time. When I was in the elementary school, prior to COVID, just kind of watching the skill sets or lack thereof coming into kindergarten, and their ability to manage discord or manage someone telling them no, or manage not getting what they wanted when they wanted, was very eye-opening to me. I think limiting the screen time in elementary school, get back to basics, working on those fine motor skills is huge. For middle school, I think consistent practices with the cell phone usage, and making sure kids, if the directive is off and away, then their phone's off and away. And we got to keep being on that, because the feel of our whole building just goes down when the phones are away. Our behavior is down, the stress, the fighting all goes down. Making sure they're on their screens when they're invited to, and it's academic, and providing outside time, free screen time when it's available. And then high school, again, consistent practices, some more autonomy with school issued devices. Kids are going to have to figure it out. You know, eventually they're getting to that age where they're going to have to manage it, because as we know, this is not going away. And then rather than the off and away, and I think most of our high schools in our district do allow this, students get to have their phone in the hallway or the lunchroom, just not in the classroom. I do believe they have to set their phones in the little holders in the classroom when they come in. So where do we start? So one of the things, when I did the social media challenge, there was a student in that grade whose mother is a school counselor at Apple Valley High School. So she and I have worked together in Farmington, actually, and just collaborated on stuff. And she's the one that introduced me to this book, The Anxious Generation. And so we collaborated as their high school, our middle school, and then the elementary that feeds directly into us. So it was the high school counselors and admin, our counselors and admin, and then the elementary school social worker and admin team. And we did a parent night this fall. It was well attended for our first attempt, but certainly not as big as maybe we wanted it to be. And we talked a lot. We kind of did what you're doing, but in one evening. So we broke it down between play-based, phone-based, kind of educating on that, and then moving forward. I mean, the parents that were there were ready to move forward and make sure there was no technology in school and and all those great things. But I think we have the ball rolling and started. And so I think where to start, especially if you haven't, is collaborating with your school's PTP or your whatever you may call your parent collaboration team, having a standalone parent night, bringing out breakout sessions with, bringing therapists in or administration and teachers, or just kind of explaining, the harms of social media or how to balance that, how to parent that. Maybe incorporate an information booth or a breakout session with another planned family night. Have visuals of data or facts about social media and the mental health effects at a back to school night, just to kind of catch their eye, like, oh, and then maybe sending home data and facts sent home in monthly or weekly newsletters. On the left here, I just found this on Instagram one day, and I'm mad at myself because I just screenshotted it. I didn't save it, so I don't know exactly where I got it, but it just talks about, we're raising our kids, the screens aren't, but how much are we, allowing? And I am grateful that my kids, we didn't have social media when my kids were younger, because I'm not sure how good I would have been as a role model with that, that it wasn't an option for me to be on my phone because it wasn't there. But I think, as we've talked about earlier too, is kind of finding that group of parents and working together as you navigate parenting this. And as educators, I think being as consistent as we can with our practices, and kids getting used to not being on their phones or not being on their screens, knowing, well, I can do that. As a parent, so I have a 27-year-old and a 22-year-old, both boys. My 27-year-old, by the time like the Snapchat was coming around and things like that, he was well into high school. So his experience was different, and he is a different kid too, is very, a lot more introverted and shy. So not as worried about him with that. However, as a young adult, he does struggle with anxiety, and he's the kind of kid that he went and wrestled for the University of Nebraska, can wrestle in front of 18,000 people, but he really struggles with going to talk to a professor. And at this moment in his life, when he's trying to figure life outside of college and wrestling, he knows he can't be on social media. Because in his world, and and it's baffling to me sometimes, but he sees what all of his friends are doing or teammates are doing and compares himself. So he knows he personally just takes himself off it because it's not healthy for him. My other son, and when we gave Taylor, our oldest, a phone, he was in 6th grade, and it was like the slide phone. Remember the texting, kind of that fancy. So it was just text and phone. By the time Parker came up in 6th grade, he got an iPhone. So we were already involved with that. He got Snapchat in 7th grade. Had I known now what I knew then, he would not have gotten Snapchat in 7th grade. One in particular incident, the boys were home, they got in a big fight. Parker slammed his phone down as hard as he could, and he broke it. And I was like, well, that is super unfortunate, because you're not getting a phone for a long time, and you're buying yourself a new one. And about 2.5 weeks into this no phone, he said, hey, Mom, can I talk to you and tell you something without you getting mad? And I was like, well, I make no promises, so let me know what it is. And he said, well, I'm kind of glad I broke my phone. And I said, why is that? And he said, because I just feel like I'm a different person. And I said, and you know what? You're acting like a different person. I feel like I'm getting my son back. Eventually he got a phone again. But from that point on, 7th grade up until 2020, which was his junior year of COVID, at minimum of once a month, he said, Mom, I'm putting my phone down for 24 hours. Or Mom, I'm going to shut my phone off for a weekend. He knew he couldn't take it anymore. And you could see him, like his behavior changed, his attitude changed. And I'm not sure I would have figured that out. I think I might have just been like, oh, he's a teenager. Oh, he's just being a jerk. But I really do think it had such a negative impact on him, and him forcefully having to have that phone taken away had him figured out that's what he needed. And he's not one that's on social media. Now I do say that with a caveat. He probably has extra accounts now that he's in college and doesn't want me to see stuff. But from what I see, he's certainly not one that posts very often. I think they both realize kind of that negative effect that they have with that. So I feel like I've talked a ton. I don't know if anybody has any questions for me, or Liz, if you can think of anything that we had talked about that I may be forgetting. I did have a separate parent ready to go, but she was on her honeymoon and it kind of just took a while for her to get back. So I told her not to worry about it. So you got to hear my parenting part of that.
No, I appreciate that, Jen. And you put together a slide deck as well, and I will link that onto our dashboard. And Jen took a lot of the resources that we already have on the dashboard and put them together. Haidt has been really good about sharing his graphs and all that fun stuff. Any questions for Jen?
Jen, in that slide deck that Liz is going to share out, did you have any of the topics specifically that you shared when you did your education nights, or did you let the parents come up with those?
So what you'll get is what our parent night was, and how we structured it is, so like I kind of introduced it, and then one of the high school counselors talked about what play-based means. And then, so like I talked, and then we had guided questions for the tables to talk. And then kind of it was a small enough group and an intimate enough group that we could just kind of talk together. And then somebody talked about play-based, and then we had guided questions for them, and those should be in that as well. And then we did like a turn and talk at the table. And we tried to like have different levels of parents to get different perspectives. So.
Thank you.
Yep. I will say, I think that, so what was your participation like? I want to say we had 30 parents there, or 30, yeah, with us. And we had one high school student that was it was really all parents. And then one high school student came with their parents and was like, not super happy about what we were saying, but God, it was mature enough to understand like the need for, of that. So.
It's like being told that junk food you're eating isn't good for you. Well, I know, but still, I don't want to change. And I appreciate Marty you sharing in the chat as well. And Marty, I'm remembering when you shared your school's policy of bell to bell, and I think you talked about at the time, like, yes, we'd like to do all day, but we're just not there yet. This is where we are now, and I think I so respect that Jen went in all in on. Not during the day, but it's what are the first next steps that you're taking. So I really appreciate that, Jen. We have a few minutes left, and we have a few things we want to get to and share. So and we have a short video to play for you, which we hope will give you some warm fuzzies in your heart. So thank you, Jen. Really appreciate you.
And if anybody has any questions looking at that slide deck or of what our presentation was, don't hesitate to reach out. I'll be more than happy to help anybody or answer questions. Thank you very much.
And I'll share that in my follow-up email as well. As a culmination of the book, the big takeaway that you'll see in the headline for this book is the norms for collective action that Haidt shares. Those being feeling like they may be a little much, like a lot. Like how do I do this? It's too late. I teach in a high school, and or middle school, and every single child has a phone. We may feel like it's too much, but what Haidt offers us is some recommendations of all ages. And we put all of this in one document for you. So that's on the dashboard. We took all of these recommendations and which are followed up then by each age has some more specific recommendations. So we put all of that together for you. So you have that, and you're welcome to use that, make a copy, change it, do what works for you as a resource. And I'll let you finish this up.
We also shared in the dashboard, thank you, Liz, the podcast between Lisa Damour and I'm forgetting the gentleman who's interviewing her. Lisa Damour was actually the psychologist who informed Inside Out 2. She was the contact for that movie. And all I did on this slide was capture what I thought were key points from the podcast, but I thought you would want to listen to the podcast to capture your own if any of this appeals to you. So maybe check out these bullet points and then maybe listen to the podcast. It's just a really insightful, enlightening podcast about how we develop resilience in our kids, despite the social media that they are exposed to and the anxiety that surrounds them. lastly, we have some steps that we're offering you before we share this very short video, as Liz promised. The next slide talks about what you could do at the exploring level is listen to the podcast. You might also use that document that Liz pulled together for us on developing agency at different age levels. You might plan something with your parent leaders, as Jen had described. We did a very similar parent night specifically related to internet use and social media when I was a middle school principal, about the same size school. We had 1,350 6th, 7th, and 8th graders. Surprisingly, very popular turnout. Like 100 parents the very first time we did it. We did 3 different breakouts. It's a great opportunity to get parents involved in doing it with you. So as promised, the video. I forget where this was first shared with me, but I shouldn't guarantee. I think you'll enjoy it. And we wanted to leave you with a message of warmth and hope based on this less than 2-minute video.
And let me know if there's any sound issues.
If you could have dinner with anyone, living or dead, who would you choose?
Kylie Minogue.
Marilyn Monroe. Oh God, I wouldn't have a clue.
I know, straight up. Paul Hogan.
Kim Kardashian.
No.
I'd like to have dinner with Justin Bieber.
What? He's not coming to my house.
I'd have Bob Hawke.
Dave Hughes.
Barry Humphries.
Jimi Hendrix.
People who have made a difference in the world, maybe Nelson Mandela at the dinner table.
I don't know what he's going to say. I'm scared.
If you could have dinner with anyone in the world, who would you choose?
Probably our whole family, like a whole extended family.
Mum and Dad. Mum and Dad. Does it have to be a celebrity? Could it be family?
We love it. We talk about how school is. We ask Mum and Dad how their day was.
Family.
Yeah, Mum and Dad.
Family. Who would you like to have dinner with?
They just want to be with us while they're eating food, which is pretty cool.
They see us above everything. I'm going to get...
Yeah.
Yeah.
Bit of a message in it for me.
Yes.
What are we having for dinner?
So there you go. That's your other action step. More family dinners.
If you could have dinner with...
We appreciate you taking time to spend with us these last 4 sessions and look forward to your feedback. We really do take that feedback to heart. You are the reason we did the series, and your ideas help us decide what might be another source of support for leaders in Minnesota. So thank you.
Thanks, Ann. And I'll send a follow-up email with links to things and info about CEUs. And if you are doing makeup CEUs, just get us that information by a week from today. And enjoy. And I hope those of you who are feeling sick feel better. And thank you, Jen. Have a great rest of your week.
Thank you.